30 minutes. It's going to be 30 minutes of nothing but crime victims, news and views, and inside the criminal justice system. Aren't you so excited? And Ray even brought some statistics along to show you too on the radio. So we're going to get to that. Plus, police officers, okay, do they get paid to get shot and beat up? Is that part of the job, or do they become crime victims too when that happens? You never really thought of it that way. A lot of people don't. I think they just think it's a cost of doing business. I don't agree. And the next topic we're going to discuss is, you know, a guy rapes and mauls and murders someone, gets a fair trial. He's sentenced to death by a jury of his peers, and still the number one way to die on death row is of old age. And finally, if someone acts like a dog, do you put them down like a dog? Well, Oklahoma seems to have gotten it right in some people's opinion here with their latest execution of a guy that basically decided he was going to strangle a guy to death, and for that he was sentenced to death, and they decided to let the vet do it. Is that what happened there?
No, not exactly.
Anyway, we'll get to that. First, let's talk about the first topic, police officers, okay? Is it part of the job? Do they expect that they're going to have to get shot and stabbed and beat up, or do they become crime victims too?
Well, of course they become crime victims. And last week we talked about a case in which Nick Whitcomb, a Lexington police officer, was shot in the right shoulder while he was chasing a bad guy. And as I was trying that case, I just thought a little bit about how many people, since I've been Commonwealth Attorney here, how many people that I'm aware of that are firefighters and police officers have been shot, killed, or wounded, and how when you leave home, for example, when you leave home, you hope you come home at night.
Yeah, that's sort of the goal.
Yeah, well, sometimes police officers and firefighters don't. I can remember years ago, Roy Martis was out in a cornfield looking for a fugitive, and he was shot and killed. And when I'm trying this case, I realized Nick Whitcomb left home that night. He talked about his getting ready to go to work, and he did. And I asked him while he was on the witness stand, I said, does it ever occur to you that maybe you won't come home? And he says, you know, you'd think about it a little bit, but not realistically. He says, I think about it a whole lot more now than I used to. So Roy Martis, and then remember Joe Angelucci was out serving a warrant, a mental warrant on a guy. The guy just was doing fine, and then he quick grabbed Angelucci's gun and shot and killed him with it. And it was an agonizing death. He spent a long time in the hospital and then ultimately died. Remember Ed Lingenfelter? Ed Lingenfelter made a traffic stop, and next thing you know, somebody came up and shot him right in the face and in the arm, and he had to retire.
And that same guy shot a transit police officer.
That's right.
Come across the guy, what, about 30 minutes late?
Right. Then we got Tim Russell. Tim Russell was responding to a domestic violence call. Next thing you know, he gets shot right in the neck. He had to retire. He's now back as a civilian employee with the police department. But I thought about that. As a matter of fact, Tim was a witness in the Whitcomb case. You know, and so I'm sitting here listening to him. He's got that scratchy voice now. You got Chuck Williams, was a firefighter, some bum lit a building on fire, and he was there, and he was killed in the process of fighting that, or died as a result of fighting that fire. Then you got Aaron Kidd was chasing an armed robber. Guy turned on him and shot him right below the nose and above his mouth, right there. So he got shot. You got Brenda Cowan. Remember Brenda Cowan? Just doing her job, going out to respond to a woman who had been shot and killed, was in the front yard of her house, and the guy that killed her shot and killed Brenda Cowan and shot Jim Sanford in the head.
Another firefighter.
Yeah, but he survived. And then of course, you got Brian Durman, who was responding to, of all things, a loud noise complaint. Next thing you know, he's run over and killed. So,
And you know, you go through this list, and these are all officers and firefighters in our community here in Lexington. You know, you realize it's a dangerous job. It really is. And we couldn't even begin to go through the list of officers that have to retire on injuries as a result of fighting these people. And that's what always aggravates me about the tasers. And finally, that has settled down. People have come to understand that the tasers are a great tool for police officers. They minimize injuries not only to the officers but to the suspects, because it creates less injury to tase them than it would to have to hit them with a stick. You know, so I mean, that's what it really boils down to. The taser just looks mean, but the reality of it is, it doesn't break your skin, doesn't put knots on you. It's something that is used to control someone. But you know, you forget about the fact that every time an officer has to put his hands on someone who otherwise should be cooperating and has to get into a fight with someone, stands a chance of tearing his shoulder out, tearing his back out, just getting hurt. And officers go out on disability all the time because of that, in addition to being just shot. So it's more than just the more dramatic cases where officers get a gun stuck to their face and get half their face blown off. Every day they're falling off the line because of all these injuries. So we got to support our police officers and understand what's involved with the job, because they're the first line of defense.
don't forget, Nick Whitcomb was simply responding to a call from a worried citizen from the Winburn neighborhood that two people were looking in cars. 2 o'clock in the morning, he goes out there just to respond to the call. Next thing you know, he's chasing one of these two guys across the field next to Winburn Middle School. He's reaching for his taser because the guy fell once and then got up, tried to run again, fell
He's
again.
thinking non-lethal force.
He's catching him.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, he's looking at this muzzle
He's got
flash.
a taser in his hand and during a gunfight.
Well, he didn't have it out. He's just reaching for it. So it's scary business.
Which is the other thing with police officers. You know, we are trained to use the least amount of force necessary to take control of the situation. I mean, that is always first thing in our mind, which puts us a step behind a lot of times. If someone chooses to take that to a deadly force encounter, most of the time, because of the nature of how we do business, we've got to react to it. You know, we don't run around with machine guns waiting for somebody to make the wrong move. We've got to assess that move in a split second, determine whether or not it's a threat, and then how best to deal with it. Because we're not only talking about our lives that are on the line, we're talking about our homes, we're talking about our freedom, because, you know, there's a lot at stake when you leave the house. It's not just a matter of whether or not you're going to come home. In fact, if you talk to a lot of police officers, you know, you talk to Nick, yeah, getting hurt is in your mind, but, you know, the concern of doing the right thing and the liability involved, it's a very high liability job, and that's always in the front of your mind too, for lots of reasons.
Let me tell you an interesting study and it actually has a statistic in it.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, that there was a study done between what they call hot burglaries. The study was done. They studied hot burglaries in Florida and hot burglaries in Massachusetts. Now, hot burglary is a burglary that occurs when somebody's in the house. That's what a hot burglary is. Now, in Florida, only 7% of the burglaries were what they call hot burglaries. In Massachusetts, 57% of the burglaries were hot burglaries. Now, and they wanted to study why the difference. Well, Massachusetts has a draconian gun prevention law. It's against the law to have a gun in Massachusetts. In Florida, it's not against the law to have a gun. So they asked some of these bums that were committing these hot burglaries, and they said, in Florida, why do you do that? Why do you not do a hot burglary? Why do you not burglarize?
Why do you choose to make sure people are not home?